Hi, folks. Welcome. We are so excited to have you. We can't wait to get started, but we are going to give it a few minutes so that we make sure as many people are on before we get going. But thank you for joining us today. I hope everyone's having a great day. Hi, folks. Welcome. As you are joining, feel free to drop your name, your organization in the chat. We'd love to hear where you're coming from. I already see questions about recording, and yes, we will have a recording of this available immediately on our YouTube, but also later for attendees. We will be getting started in a few minutes, but thank you all so much for your patience, and we can't wait to answer your questions. Okay, well, we have an action-packed agenda for you all today, so we are going to go ahead and get started. As I said already, this event will be recorded for folks who are coming on late or who have to leave early. But to kick us off, I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining us. My name is Hannah Reed, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for Evergreen Action. I am so excited to talk with some of my wonderful friends today about the Inflation Reduction Act and specifically the Community Change Grants Program. Our hope is that this conversation can provide people insight into the grant application process, support you in strengthening your own proposals, and connect you with the resources you need to complete a successful federal application. But before we go too far into this, let me introduce our speakers. So to get us started, I want to introduce Sheila Foster, who is a professor at Columbia University's Climate School. Previously, she was the Scott K. Ginsburg Professor of Urban Law and Policy at Georgetown University. Sheila is a leading scholar for environmental and climate justice. She has been recognized by the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Academy of Environmental Law and with its 2018 Senior Scholarship Award, and by the American College of Environmental Lawyers, which recently elected her as a fellow. Throughout her career, Foster has worked with local governments, federal agencies, and public officials on a range of urban, environmental, and climate issues. She helped to launch the Global Parliament of Mayors and has been a member of the New York City Panel on Climate Change since 2016, serving as co-chair of its working group on climate equity. Foster also co-directs LabGov, an international applied research laboratory that pioneered the award-winning co-city approach, which has been adopted in cities around the world, helping them reorient towards more collaborative and place-based solutions to urban challenges. Sheila, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. So I'm going to start by describing an application.
Oh, wait, Sheila, before you get started, let me introduce Raya and Genesis, and then I will make sure that we kick it over to you as
Great.
well.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
No, you're totally fine. So starting off next, we're going to introduce Raya Salter, aka the Climate Auntie. Raya is an energy justice attorney, activist, author, and the founder and executive director of the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center. She is also on the advisory board for Evergreen and is a member of the New York State Climate Action Council and is on the Coalition of Green Capital Environmental Justice Advisory Board. Raya is an adjunct professor at Cardozo Law School and is widely published on matters of energy regulation and is the author of the book Energy Justice. She has over 15 years of energy regulatory experience, both in private practice and for NGOs, and she is an environmental justice advisor to the House Oversight and Natural Resource Committees and has testified before Congress twice. Raya, thank you so much for being here with us and for all of the work you do. If you want to introduce yourself real quickly.
Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here and talk about this and encourage folks to get on board with this opportunity.
Thank you, Raya. And our final guest is Génesis Sánchez. Génesis is a senior grant specialist at the Environmental Protection Network, specializing in the community change grants. In her role, Génesis creates new and deeper connections between disadvantaged communities, EPA alumni with decades of expertise, and other allies to provide assistance to community-identified projects. With a Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology from the Central University of Venezuela and a master's degree in public policy and social development from Beijing Normal University, Génesis blends her academic background with community-centered work. She has also I'm so sorry. She also has nearly a decade of experience in nonprofits, private sector, and international development organizations, and currently lives in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Génesis, we could not be more grateful for you to join us today, specifically with your knowledge on this topic. So if you want to come off mute and introduce yourself for a moment.
Hi, everyone. Hola a todos y todas. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Génesis. So first, before we go further, just a couple of notes. Number one, our agenda. So Raya and Sheila are going to talk with us about their partnership and their application. Génesis is then going to share with us some of the most common pitfalls and solutions she sees as organizations apply for these grants, plus point us to some great technical assistance resources. We'll also talk a bit about a few other federal grant opportunities that are upcoming, and we will leave 15 or so minutes for Q&A from the audience at the end. If you want to ask a question, please click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to make sure that gets answered for you. And to find the resources that we're referencing throughout this webinar, please check out the resource section. There's an icon at the bottom of your Zoom window that will have all of the resources that we mentioned. But let's go ahead and dive in. And actually, to get us started, Raya, we have a lot to get through today, so I'm going to let you dive right in first. Folks should know that a unique feature of these grants is the partnership requirement. Can you tell us about how your organization, Energy Justice Law and Policy Center, decided to partner with Columbia Climate School and what you proposed in your application?
Yes, I'm so delighted to do so. Can you hear me? Yes, we're good. Awesome. Wonderful. So yes, I'll speak very briefly to the nature of this partnership and really the organizing that was necessary to try and bring this region-wide solution to my community. So as we know, the IRA, in addition to things like the bipartisan infrastructure law, is really a once-in-a-generation opportunity for climate justice funding. And this is due in no small part to the Justice 40 initiative, directing funds to designated disadvantaged communities, those who have been historically disinvested in. And of course, in New York State, we have our own state version of this Justice 40. And so it's a huge opportunity, but only if our local community-based organizations, our local governments and stakeholders are brought into the loop. And I've really spent the past couple of years crisscrossing my community, giving talks to educate stakeholders about these opportunities, including the community change grants. But this one is particularly important. They are really the IRA's banner vehicle to get resources to the ground to EJ groups. And the structure of the grant itself, it really requires that a community-based organization be a part of a partnership. And it also encourages multiple collaborating entities. So it's asking for a broad, really partnerships to get money to the ground. But the process isn't a piece of cake. And I realized that if my community was going to benefit, I was going to have to step into the plate. This meant real organizing to get folks on board for a Westchester-wide concept that Professor Foster will talk to now. One of my representatives, my local representatives, said that this really addresses a key obstacle. We want federal and state money to get to EJ groups, but the technical expertise to actually access the funds and execute lasting infrastructure projects takes a lot of expertise. And my organization, partnering with Columbia's Climate School, presented really that base of expertise. And I have to say that this could not have happened without the goodwill and the expertise and the partnership of Columbia, and also Professor Foster, who is truly eminent in her field and is walking the walk on what environmental justice and equity means, for community engagement. And so really what we did is we decided to create a community-based application, which meant we invited stakeholders to self-select throughout the county to be a part of the grant. And that meant significant outreach. And it means you have to know your people. We set up a web page with an explainer video. We created a forum for users to present applications. I hosted regular drop-in sessions for, organizing for stakeholders to just jump in and ask questions. We had one-on-ones with our local service providers. We know our folks in our community, and that's the point here. It's like we want to get this money to give the most benefit to our designated disadvantaged communities, our frontline communities, and the folks who know how to do that are the folks giving the services. So we had to do that outreach, line up who our different coalition was going to be. We had a big public-facing event at a local soul food restaurant that was co-sponsored by our allies, and we invited our public officials. Yes, we did give out chicken, and so yes, we had excellent attendance. And we got a lot of support from our state and local and federal delegations. And this resulted in an application that had wide participation and support from dozens of organizations and our local public officials. So the moral of the story is, now is the time to empower your community to get the resources to shore up our institutions and deliver services on climate to benefit our communities. And I will send it back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much for that, Raya. And I gotta say, I wanted to make sure I get an invite to the next one of those soul food meetups. That sounds like a great opportunity. And I really,
She can burn.
oh,
Like,
I know.
I will say that they do a nice job, especially, for the North.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I want to go to the next one, but I really appreciated what you were saying about how you came to your community and all of the stakeholder engagement that you had. Sheila, I'd love to move to you now. In addition to all of the other work that you do and the work that Raya mentioned, you helped pull together this grant application for this proposal. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to walk us through it so we can see what this would look like.
Yes, for sure. And thank you so much for having me. And it's just been such an honor to work with Raya, who's also a giant in her field. And I've spent my career working with communities. So this is a wonderful example of what a university community partnership looks like. And also, I'm going to share my screen a sec. There's a question in the chat about a regional approach to these applications. And so I hope that our example here will, can you see that? Will answer that question. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, great. Okay, so here's what we proposed. A hub, basically, Resilient Westchester hub. And Westchester, I'm going to talk a little bit about the county. But basically, it's a collaborative proposal by the Climate School at Columbia and Raya's organization, the Energy Justice Law and Policy Center, which is rooted in the county and in the communities. Obviously, it's track one of the climate change NOFO, sorry, and it is a comprehensive regional initiative focused on both climate resilience and pollution reduction. We're going to talk about some of the targets in the application in a minute. And the hub idea is really to bring together community-based organizations from around the region, researchers at Columbia University that can bring resources to those communities, a host of civic organizations, local businesses, and public officials, as well as to provide financing and critical resources for organizations in the region. One of the aspects of this NOFO is that they do want you to leverage this money to finance the community change and transformation. And we thought that this required some data analysis and cutting edge technologies, as well as community engagement, which the hub will support. Just a little bit about Westchester County, for those of you who don't know it, it's right north of the Bronx in New York City. It has about 1 million people. It's a mix of suburban and urban areas. The reputation that it has is a affluent suburb outside of New York City, but there are significant racial and income disparities. Some examples are that it's got the highest concentration of mapped disadvantaged communities outside of New York City, and obviously it's significant income disparities as shown on the screen. Here are some of the mapped disadvantaged communities that we're focused on. And this map includes both the New York State map, but also the EPA map. New York State has a historic climate law and also a mapping screen. And so we're focused on a number of communities around the region, including Mount Vernon City, which is 71% Black and the largest African-American majority city in the state. Yonkers, the subject of a historic school desegregation case for the lawyers in the room who may know this. Also a large city with majority people of color. New Rochelle, and Peekskill, which I'll come back to in a minute, which hosts an incinerator, and then Portchester Village. Here is one of the maps that we submitted as part of our application, which shows the local governments, but within them, the EPA IRA disadvantaged communities. It should also be noted on the right that we are working with the Shinnecock Nation, which is not in Westchester County, but in the region. And I'll talk more about their role. So some of the challenges that we're addressing in the hub is that majority Black and Brown communities are classic EJ communities, environmental justice communities, in large part because of historic and structural racism, which has led to poor infrastructure, including lack of a tree canopy and viable green spaces, highly vulnerable to climate risks. Some of these are coastal communities. There's lots of flooding in homes because of overtaxed sewage systems in the DACs. The trash incinerator in Peekskill is one of the state's dirtiest, so we're going to address alternative waste and recycling. And then, of course, lots of challenges around health impacts and energy burden, which are many times higher for DACs and the households. Some of the opportunities which the grant also asks for, right? Not just the challenges, but what are some of the benefits and opportunities? I've already mentioned that there's a New York State law with ambitious climate goals, including the 40% requirement that it benefit DACs. In fact, Justice 40 was scaled up from this law. The county is also ground zero for the offshore wind sector. So there's new transmission being built through several of the DACs. And so this is an opportunity to be renewable. And some of the energy innovations, including a microgrid that the Shinnecock Nation is working on, they're going to be a partner to hopefully help the DACs in Westchester model that kind of microgrid. And we have a workforce development component. And again, a plan to leverage this money to go after green bank money, which has recently been capitalized by the EPA. There's also a planning aspect. Lots of the local governments around the county are just engaging in comprehensive planning and sustainable planning. And we need to make sure that these communities are participants in that. So here are some of the strategies of track 1 that we've hit, right? The infrastructure, nature-based solutions, energy efficient. We have solar panels as well as the microgrid, workforce training, microgrid installation, waste reduction, and a circular economy. And then a pollution reduction strategy for outdoor air quality and community health improvements. Happy to answer any questions about any of these. Here's the collaborative part, which this grant is looking for. So we're the lead and statutory organizations and partners, but we're joined by 5 core implementation partners, the sub-awardees, as well as several supporting partners. On the next slide, I'll get to some of these, and they include a host of organizations from around the region, both grassroots-based as well as government, and workforce development organizations that are already operating in the region to train folks in the green economy. And the idea is that given the fragmented nature of the region and these efforts, we want to pull them together. And that's the idea of the hub, and to leverage all of those efforts to really spark a transformative change. And so just a sense of the PIs at Columbia, we have someone who's been working in community and an expert on energy and security and assessing that. We have someone who is a green energy and microgrid expert. We have data collection folks and someone who runs a coastal resiliency lab that does co-production. Here are some of the partners around the region that we're using, some of them civic organizations, some of them companies that are consultants, not sub-awardees. And we got a number of letters of support from various organizations, Alliance for Justice, et cetera, Rise Up, as well as elected officials, et cetera. And this is what it looks like. Here's what our hub idea looks like. We submitted this graphic that the community-based organizations and local government will engage with community residents, work on the community-based adaptation and mitigation, and the community center agriculture and green infrastructure. Columbia, along with Raya's organization, we will work on the data collection analysis, the community engagement, the resilience planning, innovative financing, infrastructure development, and then various implementation partners will take the lead on other aspects, including the solar, the microgrid, the workforce, and the waste reduction. And finally, we also submitted this map, which shows simply the number of projects in each of the DACs around the region. And so the darker the red, the more of the various projects that we've listed and the strategies that are outlined in the grant. So I'm going to stop here and we'll take questions, I guess, but hopefully that gives you a high-level overview of our application, with the important caveat that it's still in the pipeline. So we put this together and we hope it's successful, but we have not gotten a notice either way, except that we know that it's moving through the process. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for walking us through that. I feel like I'm really excited to see where this project that you all have come up with can go. But understanding this took a lot of work for you two to get there, and that required a lot of support. Genesis, I would love to move over to you to talk about what type of support there is out there. As someone actually providing technical assistance on these grant applications, I know that you have deep expertise on what groups are running into as they're going through the process. So can you talk a bit about what some of the best strategies that you are seeing out there, as well as some of the common pitfalls that people might be falling into?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you so much to Professor Foster for speaking up and sharing your experience applying for this grant. A lot of organizations are very competitive and they don't want to share, their process. So the fact that you're here talking about this while you're still in the pool of applicants is wonderful. So I'm just so grateful to be here. And yes, I have prepared a presentation in which I'm going to guide the attendees of this webinar around successes or best practices, and then those challenges that you may face and how to overcome them. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second. Can you see my screen? So again, thank you so much for having me. I'm Génesis Sánchez. I work at the Environmental Protection Network. We are a 501c3 organization providing pro bono technical assistance to low resource organizations or organizations that are serving disadvantaged communities. And we really harness the power and the knowledge of a network of 650 EPA alumni, people who work at EPA for a long time, they have retired, and now they sort of lend their expertise to support communities. So EPN staff and those volunteers work together to provide that support to communities, which is a wonderful thing. For the Community Change Grants Program, I personally have provided assistance to hundreds of organizations. We're proud to even report that out of the 21 organizations that have been announced as selected for CCG, EPN was able to work to some degree with 6 of them. Even a couple of them received grants review from EPN volunteers, which, you know, is maybe a testament of the work we're doing and how important it is for these communities. I provide, specialized feedback on the notice of funding opportunity, but as well as CFR regulations, budget, procurement, and whatnot. Having said that, let's talk about one of the big issues that organizations walk through, and that is eligibility. So as you probably know, to be eligible for this opportunity, and Professor Foster and even Raya mentioned that, you must apply as part of a partnership. You cannot apply as a single organization. The partnership, as a slideshow, can be between 2 community-based organizations or 1 community-based organization and another community-based organization, a federally recognized tribe, a local government at the county level, or an institution of higher education. It could also be a minority serving institution. So first, you have to log that relationship. Now, the issue a little bit is that sometimes organizations ask us, can 3 entities be part of that relationship? And the answer is no. So that statutory partnership needs to happen between 2 organizations. That is going to be the lead applicant and the statutory partner. We recommend organizations to be strategic, especially with the selection of the lead applicant. Why is that? Well, the lead applicant, if possible, should have some experience managing federal awards or large non-federal grants. You will be asked in your application, what is your experience managing, large grants and reporting? And then you'll have to provide that experience for the lead applicant, not the statutory partner. So that selection is going to be strategic for you. So if your lead applicant doesn't have that experience, it has happened to me that some organizations come and say, hey, we just don't have that experience. Well, there is a possibility for you. You can get a neutral score in the application with this specific question by stating that you don't have that experience, but you have to put it in there in writing so that the reviewer knows. The community change technical assistance resources that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is providing to communities are, they have really good resources. And one of them is a sample of the partnership agreement. Lots of communities and organizations come to us with questions around this. So there is a sample that you can check in the link that I put in there, and we'll share these slides. You can go to that sample, check it out, use it, and of course, customize it depending on some, local regulations or in consultation with your lawyer. Then the other thing is talking about those collaborating entities. This is, as the previous speakers mentioned, this is a grant about collaboration. So if you show that you have multiple collaborating partners, that is a sign of a strong application. I'm saying there that there is no limiting funding. So you can, as the lead applicant is the one that will receive the funding, the lead applicant can sub-award some funding to the statutory partner and the collaborating entities, and there is no limit as to how much you are giving to them. That's a frequent question. Is there a maximum amount that I can give to a collaborating entity? The answer is no to that. However, there is one question in which, not a question, but more like a criterion. So you will be evaluated as to how equitable the funding is distributed among partners. So that is something that you should think of when deciding who is doing what and how much is given to them. And then for-profit organizations cannot participate as collaborating entities, nor as a statutory partner, nor as a lead applicant. Multiple organizations come to me asking, oh, I have this for-profit company, they're amazing, they want to be, a collaborating entity. They cannot. And we're going to be talking about that. There is a difference between sub-awardees and contractors. And lots of organizations have questions about this. What is the difference? So let me tell you a little bit about it. A sub-award is basically a financial assistance transaction between EPA and a recipient. But this transaction does not require a competition. It's basically that the lead applicant decides who is getting the money. So the lead applicant is deciding who is going to be the statutory partner and the collaborating entities. And this relationship is not about profit. There is no profit involved. So again, as I mentioned in the previous slides, collaborating entities and statutory partner will be the sub-awardees. Now, contractors are different. If you have, one specific, organization or company that is providing a service that is key to your project, unfortunately, you should not list them as part of your application because the EPA requires that any contract that is above the 10,000 micro purchase level should be procured in a competitive process. Should be, you should open an open bid, and then everybody should participate, including this great entity that you have been in contact with. So organizations come to me again saying, oh, we have this accounting firm or this firm that is going to do evaluation. Can they be, can we list them? Can we work with them? Potentially they could, but still you need to open that process. It needs to be fair, and they could compete. I mean, if they get selected, they will continue working with you. Now, that definition of disadvantaged community is another important thing that you should be thinking about. The EPA has, defined what a disadvantaged community is, any census block that is at or above the 90th percentile for any of the EJ screen supplemental indexes when compared to the nation or the state. That could be a farm worker community, any geographic area within tribal lands, a disadvantaged unincorporated community. Now, recently, EPA released an updated notice of funding opportunity. In that new NOFO, they have included a new map, the EPA Disadvantaged Community Environmental and Climate Justice Program map. This basically is adding up different layers of different maps, included the IRA disadvantage map that Dr. Foster mentioned. And if you have not applied for a CCG grant, you should now be using this map. That is sort of like the expectation. For track 1 applications, you need to think of like a one contiguous and compact project area. The one that Professor Foster showed makes total sense. I mean, she took like this piece of New York, and then she's identifying communities in there that she's going to be benefiting, or like the organizations are going to be benefiting through the grant. Some organizations come to me saying, well, I would like to have a track 1 application for all New York. Well, that's still a possibility, but there is some information in the NOFO that states that the investments for track 1 should be concentrated. So if your project area is really large, those investments will be like less concentrated. Track 2 applications, though, do not require a map. so you can play around with the geographic scope of your proposal. I have provided assistance to organizations that are doing a track 2 application that involves communities across the US and even some territories. So that may be possible. However, the definition of what the community is should be there. It should be strong. And that is my next bullet point. Who is the community that you are trying to benefit, right? I'm putting there like an example of how you can say, well, we're benefiting some BIPOC people. And it's like, okay, BIPOC is a broad term. Like, what do you mean? Who are these Black, brown, Latin, like, what are the issues that they are experiencing? So you need to really like identify those issues and tell the reviewer who is that community. Of course, review the notice for funding opportunity to make sure that you check all the boxes when it comes to the MAPS requirements. Now, application requirements. So a lot of organizations forget that it's not just the project narrative, but there are some mandatory requirements that you don't want to forget. I have put in there the links to the mandatory requirements. Then there is a project narrative, 20 pages for track 1, 15 pages for track 2, and then the attachments. There is something really important. Please do not forget to include proof of the CBO, why the CBO is a nonprofit organization. That could be by 2 means. You can attach the IRS letter, or you can attach that the nonprofit has been incorporated under state law as a nonprofit. So those are the 2 means. And I'm saying this because we did hear from one organization that got rejected because they forgot to attach that document. And then in here, page limits. I am including here the difference between track 1 and track 2 when it comes to the attachments and what the page limit is. Now let's talk about the project narrative. And I'm just going to be talking about specific things. I know I don't have all the time, but I hope that this really like helps you as you improve your application. So as the applicant, you will have to identify the challenges. Professor Foster talked a little bit about the challenges of that community in New York. So when you do this, there are many challenges that a community may be facing. And that is okay. The issue is a little bit when you highlight all the challenges without really making emphasis on the challenges that will be addressed through the strategies. So if you are able to make those connections, identify the big challenges, and then say, my strategies or these strategies we've selected will be addressing those challenges, that will make your proposal even better. And then the strategies should complement each other. Let's say that you're doing a climate resilience hub. So maybe that climate resilience hub is going to be built in one building that is, it has a lot of indoor pollution. Maybe there is asbestos or something. So you are going to do that process of removing that indoor pollution. Then that building will become in a climate resilience hub. And then you will add a microgrid so that it's like energy efficient. That is a way in which you are selecting different climate strategies and pollution reduction strategies, and they are, complementing each other and maximizing the benefits. Explain the roles and responsibilities, who is doing what. Now, in terms of feasibility, make sure your project can be implemented within 3 years. That is something that the EPA is really looking for. They don't want to make investments in projects that, may not be really shovel ready. And include strategies for the project to be sustained after the grant period. Maybe that is building partnerships, investing in staff, training, technology upgrades, or maybe incorporating a program income component to your project. The budget, that is another one, that is a big one. There are 3 components of the budget piece. So 1, you need to complete the SF 424 form. you have to include a sort of description of the budget as part of your project narrative, which counts as part of the 20 pages. And then you have to attach one full budget in your application. And the good news is that the ENDINA, which is the technical assistance provider for EPA, has provided a sample of this budget. And I have included one here that I'm sure you cannot see, so apologies, but I have included the link, and I'm sure Caitlin, who is working with me, she's putting the link in there. So the thing that you need to know in here is like where to place each expense. Is it like personal? And if it is personal, remember that it's only the personal that belongs to the lead applicant. If the lead applicant is paying to an employee and that employee is receiving a W-2, those expenses need to be in this category. If it's a statutory partner, that doesn't need to be in this category. If it's a collaborating entity, that doesn't need to be in here. But the sub-awards that collaborating entities and statutory partner are receiving, they should be listed in the other category. You only need to provide a lump sum of the money. That is another question that we get. How specific do we want to be? Just a lump sum will be sufficient for this portion of the budget. Participant costs, that should be included in the other category as well. So please take a look at this, and this will be like super helpful, I promise. And then last, the program management capabilities and capacity, identifying the outputs, the outcomes, tracking success, including program evaluation tools. My recommendation, staff up. I get to talk to so many small environmental justice groups, and they sort of feel guilty. They're like, oh, but we're gonna have to invest, in people. And I'm like, oh yes, this is the money and the right time for your small organization to become even bigger so that you have the capacity to manage these grants. And then one thing that we keep noticing in the applications that we review with the help of our reviewers is the outputs versus outcomes situation. So you need to, while you're putting your application together, think of ways to quantify and measure those outputs and those outcomes. I have provided here some examples that may guide you through that process. Additional tips, links will not be reviewed. So do not include links as part of your application. Be mindful of the page limits. Readability is paramount. And try to check all the boxes. So we have provided in there some like worksheets that you can use while you're writing your application, and that you can make sure that you are checking all the boxes. Oh, the storm is landing in Puerto Rico finally, so hopefully I don't lose power. But this is our team. We have a staff of lots of regional associates. We can provide one-on-one virtual assistance. We can help you to register in SAN.gov. We can help you with draft review if possible, if we have available volunteers. And we have multiple resources that we have put together. I have listed all these resources in here. They are all hyperlinked. So whenever you have time, take a look at them. And yes, and finally, before I forget, you can request assistance from EPA by completing this form. One caveat though, we will be supporting groups who are just starting their application until September 1st. After September 1st, we will only focus on supporting organizations that are more advanced with their drafts so that they can really submit them and expect the funding, I guess. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Genesis. I feel like that was just a great walkthrough of all of the different pitfalls people could fall into. And knowing that you are combating a storm over there, I want to get to the questions. If you all have questions, feel free to continue to put them into the Q&A. But just to kick things off, Genesis, can you speak to the differences between track 1 and track 2? I see a few questions about how you determine which one to use, if you can do both. And I'm wondering if you can clear up some confusion about the two tracks there.
Yes. Okay. So track 1 is about big investments, 10 to 20 million for implementation, infrastructure projects that are shovel ready. And then there are some strategies that the EPA has provided, climate action strategies and pollution reduction strategies. It's like a menu, and you sort of need to identify which strategy you will use to address the challenges. Then track 2 is more about engaging communities and giving them a voice to participate in government decision-making processes. For example, you want to create an environmental justice academy or create an advisory board. You will, do outreach in the community, get them together so that they can maybe speak to their local governments. And that the local government will sort of listen to what the community has to say. So the idea for track 2 is to really strengthen the relationship between government and community. And those grants are from $1 to $3 million.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Genesis. Another question that I'm seeing that Sheila or Raya, I'd love to hear how you thought about this, but Genesis, feel free to jump in with some more clarification, is there's a lot of questions about how to define community for these grants. Some webinars have emphasized like 1 or 2 neighborhood communities, while other are talking about like multiple broader communities and regional applications. And I think, Sheila, you touched on that a little bit, but if you or Raya want to talk to more broadly how you thought of community, and then Genesis, feel free to step in with your opinion as well.
I'll let Raya take that.
All right. I think, well, from the outset, certainly, and Genesis could speak to this, like you do have to be very careful in your application that you're serving a disadvantaged community. I think the spirit is that you're actually, at least for track, Genesis spoke to the separate tracks, but, for track 1 is that you have an actual, in place, relationship with community and community organizations, and in particular, the disadvantaged communities that you are seeking to benefit. Everything about this application, as we dug in, was about how will these communities benefit? So I think that's my answer. But take care. Take careful care when you're looking at the tools, the federal tool. Use the federal tool. Look very carefully at the boundaries of that community and make sure that you are going to be benefiting that community.
And I would just add, because there's a question in the, not the Q&A, but the chat that's related. So we didn't see anything in the no flow, and I don't think there is, that dissuades you from joining non-adjacent communities. Not only did we have a regional approach, as you saw on our map, but we also included the Shinnecock Nation, which isn't even in the county, right? So the impetus, the focus tends to be, like Raya said, on just benefiting those communities that the EPA has identified as disadvantaged. But I think you have to knit that together in a coherent, program and intervention. And that, I think, is really the challenge if you're going to include a lot of non-proximate communities. And for that, we have the county, which is knitted together through different organizations that work across this community, including WIAS.
Great. Thank you, Sheila and Raya. And anything that you want to add, Genesis? Nope. Awesome. Okay.
No, just make sure your community has clear disadvantage before submitting an application. And then you have the tools and the links that we're providing. The EPA created these wonderful maps. So it's just a matter of like putting the community in there, checking that, and that should be enough.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question just came in. How do you know how readiness is evaluated through this process, particularly for infrastructure such as microgrids? Will applicants need to have all of the permitting figured out before they submit an application? Genesis, I don't know if you can speak to that one.
Yes, so for the readiness approach, that is one attachment that you are required to submit with your track 1 application. Remember, track 2 require fewer attachments, which is great. So yes, you are required to show some proof that you have the buy-in from the local government, or that you have some permits already in place to receive the funding and then start the work. I understand that there may be some instances in which you don't have all the permits. Sometimes organizations plan on having, for example, an agreement with the local government or something that says that if that organization gets selected for a grant, then they will cooperate on making that, that project something real. Yeah. So there are like different ways to navigate this. Sometimes you do have the permits, which is great, amazing. And sometimes you just find other ways to show EPA that you have the yes, that you have the support, but that, for example, the local government is waiting for you to have the funding and being selected for the award.
Thank you so much for that, Genesis. I see a few people asking the question of when the deadline to submit is, and just wanted to let folks know that the deadline, I believe, is November 21st of this year. But as Genesis and I think Raya in the chat have mentioned, the EPA Technical Assistance Resource and DINA, that will close August 16th. And EPN will not be providing technical assistance to new applicants past September 1st. So just want to make sure that people know those deadlines, and correct me if I'm wrong, Genesis, about any of those, but I just see a few of those questions there.
Yeah, for our deadline, yes, but we will continue to provide support to organizations that are halfway through their proposals. I'm talking about beyond September 1st. Like if an organization is, halfway their project, then we will support them to just, make the final adjustments and get that application in. Because we do understand that there are a lot of small groups or like communities or organizations representing, for example, Native American folks who are taking, time to put these proposals together because they are really complicated. And we want to make sure that they end up submitting a great draft and get the funding for those communities.
Awesome, thank you. And along those lines, some folks have heard that applicants that are submitted after July are at a competitive disadvantage. Is this something that you have heard as well?
Well, the issue is that this is a rolling application process. EPA is, receiving applications, then evaluating them. So of course, like everybody is encouraged to apply as soon as possible because we don't know when, we don't know if funding will remain until November 21st. We expect that funding is going to be available, but I think at this point, August 13, time is of the essence. So I have a question actually for Professor Foster and Raya, and ask you, how long did it take you to complete a your community change grant application for track 1?
I would say months. But again, we had many communities, a region approach, a lot to get together. I would say maybe 2.5 months, Ryan, do you recall? We also had a office at Columbia that gave a great deal of support, including working with the sub-awardees on their budgets, et cetera. So that helped. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's right, Sheila. And so what I would tell folks is, suit your ambition to your time frame. Maybe you are not in a position to do, what we did, like have several collaborating entities and work out all the paperwork and put together a really complex partnership. Maybe you can do something that's a little simpler, but I still think it's worth it. Suit your ambition to what you got. That may be my advice.
Right, and you don't have to ask for the entire 20 million, right?
That's right. That's right. That's
Mm.
right.
You can also shoot for track 2, which is like less complicated and is $1 to $3 million, which is still, you know, a good amount of money.
That is right. Although I believe there are less awards in that category. So it may be an excellent strategy to do go ahead and pitch at track 1 and especially if you have a shovel ready or defined project, I think it would be worth your time.
And especially if your project is, which I agree, Raya, if your project is benefiting one of the target investment areas, which we didn't talk about that, but that could be like, I live in Puerto Rico, so territories like Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands are some of those target investment areas. If you are benefiting like an Alaskan community or I don't know, an unincorporated community, then, and you have a shovel-ready project, I would say that you may still have a good chance to get selected.
Thank you so much for that insight. Just another quick question. I think Genesis, this might be best for you. Can labor unions be sub-grantees?
Well, that's a good question. As long as they fit in those categories of community-based organization or nonprofit, I guess it's not going to be institutional higher education, but for the collaborating entities, there is more flexibility. Like you can even have state governments in there. You can have international nonprofits in there. So my question is, the union, is it like can show proof of being like a CBO? That was my question first.
So I answered a question off live about letters of support that I said we collected and then added them to an attachment, but I see that in the in the chat, someone's clarified that the new instruction is not to include those letters. So I just want to correct myself. I mean, that wasn't in the NOFA when we did it, but apparently they don't want them.
Yeah, letters of support are not required, and they're asking you not to attach materials that are not being required, but I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker for your application, Professor Foster and Raya. You'll be fine, I'm sure.
Your lips to God's ears. Okay, good.
So just probably 2 more questions because we're coming in almost at the hour, but one of the questions here is saying that the grant says that you can't do lobbying with these funds, and the person who is asking is involved with a nonprofit that helps elders advocate for government officials to transition to green energy and stop approving fossil fuels. Is this something that would be acceptable perhaps under track 2?
You cannot do lobbying with federal funds. Even like 501c4 organizations are not eligible either to apply as a collaborating entity, lead applicant, statutory partner. But, again, if you're a 501c3 organization, you can always make adjustments to your program so that it's not like fully on lobbying, but it's more on like education, advocacy, and that kind of work. So I would say it seems like a great fit for track 1, but for track 2, but you need to make some adjustments.
Thank you, Genesis. And then last question before we wrap up, is there some kind of how-to guide for local agencies wanting to access EPA grants? I know EPN has a few how-to guides for other programs, but I'm not sure for that specific.
I mean, not a one single guide that helps how to access an EPA grant. You can still go to grants.gov and identify which grants are open. for different agencies, not only the EPA, but different ones. But I'm going to clarify is that because there is so much funding for environmental justice coming through the IRA, EPA knows that they need to also invest in technical assistance. So there are a lot of, opportunities for technical assistance out there, depending on the grant. So you should be looking to find those.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Genesis and Sheila and Ryer. We really, really appreciate you joining us today. I just want to thank everyone else as well for joining us today. I'm sure that there were questions that we were not able to get entirely answered, so please feel free to connect with EPN for further technical assistance. We are going to be sending out a follow-up email that is going to include all of the resources that we mentioned in this webinar, as well as a recording. I also want to encourage people to sign up for emails at evergreenaction.com if they're wanting to find out about more of these events in the future. And I just really appreciate our great speakers. Do any of you have any final words for this group before we sign off for today?
Thank you for organizing this. I think this is such a service for our communities.
Yeah, thank you so much. And good luck, everybody. Somebody at one of our local our city councilman was like, we're giving ourselves an opportunity to fail here. Of course, we want to, don't be, but of course we want to succeed and we will succeed. But, give it a shot. We can do this. A shot is better than no shot.
I would also say that if you cannot apply for CCG, it's not the right time, you don't have a shovel-ready project, do not worry. The grant makers grants are going to be announced soon. This is another opportunity. It's not, these are like smaller grants, 100K to 350K for different tiers and projects, but that's coming this fall. So please stay tuned for, more announcements on this.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you for joining. Thank you to our wonderful speakers, and good luck to anyone out there getting ready to submit their application. We cannot wait to see all of the amazing community-based projects that we're going to have coming out in the coming months to years. So everyone have a lovely rest of your Tuesday.